A single morsel of bread. As it passes through the throat, is it a healing balm or a poison? Especially if that morsel is ruthlessly snatched away from a woman who has sweated for hours by the fire, inhaled the soot of the hearth into her lungs, and cooked that meal with burning hands, just as she is about to take a bite, right before the eyes of the entire family and those arrogant guests, simply because she could not bear a male heir. Do you truly believe that the food eaten at that table can descend as a blessing into the stomach of that stone-hearted mother-in-law or that spineless husband who remained silent while his wife was crushed? Sultan Kadın, a woman whose pride could topple mountains, snatched that warm meal from the expectant nursing mother, saying, "You have dried up my lineage. You could not give me a male grandson. You have not an atom's worth of right to the bounty of this house," and handed it to the other daughter-in-law who held a baby boy in her arms. Your blood will run cold when you hear of the terrible, deafening divine retribution she faced years later at the hands of that very grandson she boasted of as the pillar of her lineage and the daughter-in-law she once cherished. When she fell paralyzed in her bed, desperate for a single drop of water, and became a servant at the door of the poor daughter-in-law whose meal she had once stolen, you will not be able to hold back your tears, and you will say, "The Lord does not leave the cry of the oppressed unanswered." In one of Anatolia's deep-rooted, wealthy towns, Sultan Kadın was the sole and absolute ruler of that magnificent mansion, which looked down upon all the surrounding mud-brick houses with its stone walls, massive iron-wrought gates, and the ancient plane trees in its courtyard. Having lost her husband years ago, she had become the sole owner of all that property, those acres of fertile fields, hundreds of cattle in the barns, and those chests filled with gold whose location no one knew.
Sultan Kadın, bir vadın da kıdıcın, vesini, parasını, evini tarlasını, kıyafetini ve nesline bakarak yargılayan bir kadındı. Ne merhameti, ne de pişmanlığı bulunan. Unapproachable due to her immense pride, brooking no opposition to her word, she was a cruel and stone-hearted woman. For her, the most important thing in life, her sole purpose, was the continuation of her lineage. It was for that vast fortune and illustrious surname to be inherited by a male grandson of her own blood, one who would be raised at her very side. Sultan Kadın had two sons, the elder Mustafa and the younger Kemal. Kemal, the younger son, had inherited his mother's ambitious nature. He had married Asiye, the daughter of a wealthy merchant family among the town's elite. Asiye, much like her mother-in-law, was a woman who loved ostentation. Arrogant and cunning, she never spoke without rattling the gold rings on her fingers. What truly solidified Asiye's position in that grand mansion was that in the very first year of her marriage, she gave birth to the long-awaited male heir, Yiğit. On the day Asiye held that baby boy in her arms, Sultan Kadın had drums played in the town square and sacrifices offered. She covered her daughter-in-law's arms in gold bracelets. From that day forward, Asiye became the uncrowned queen of the mansion, living like a sultan who reclined and expected to be served. The elder son, Mustafa, however, was a man crushed under his mother's harsh and overbearing temperament. He was a shadow of a man devoid of his own will, bowing his head in agreement to whatever his mother said, afraid of even his own shadow. Sultan Kadın had intentionally not married Mustafa into a wealthy or noble family. Instead, she went to a neighboring village and found a poor girl whose parents had died young, a girl treated as a burden by her relatives. She brought back Zehra, a modest girl with a face as pure as an angel and a heart like a diamond. Sultan Kadın's motive was crystal clear. Zehra was alone. She had no father, no brother to stand behind her.
In this grand mansion, she could not voice even the slightest objection. Zehra would shoulder all the burdens of the household like an unpaid servant, while also bearing the many male heirs, those princes from a noble lineage that Sultan Kadın so desperately craved. In her mind, she was killing two birds with one stone. From the very first day Zehra stepped through those massive iron gates in her wedding dress, she knew neither the light of day nor a moment of peace. She would rise in the pitch black of dawn, even before the call to prayer, perform her ablutions with ice-cold water, and milk the livestock in the barn. She would scrub the stone floors of the vast mansion on her knees, light the tandoor, and reach into the scorching heat to knead dough and bake trays of bread for the entire household. She alone would prepare those lavish, ornate breakfast spreads. Asiye, however, having borne a son, would lie in her warm bed until noon, and upon waking would do nothing but sip the tea served to her with her long painted nails. While Sultan Kadın always addressed Asiye as "my lady bride, my noble daughter," she would only shout Zehra's name, treating her like a mere servant or a stray whenever she was angry. Yet Zehra, praying, "My God, I have no one else, no father's home to take me in. As long as my husband is pleased with me, my home remains intact, and my bread is not taken away," would take refuge in profound resignation and immense patience, secretly wiping her sweat with her tears, never uttering a single word of complaint. In the first year of their marriage, Zehra's belly began to grow and her pregnancy became visible. Sultan Kadın was overjoyed. "The prince of my eldest son is coming, the true pillar of this mansion, the true heir is to be born," she would say, making vows and beaming with smiles. For those months, she showed Zehra a shred of kindness and lightened the burden on her shoulders.
But when the time for birth finally arrived, and the long-awaited cry of a newborn echoed from the grand birthing room of the mansion, the midwife emerged, her head bowed in trepidation, saying, "Congratulations, Sultan Hanum, you have a beautiful baby girl." At that moment, a deathly silence, dark as pitch, descended upon the stone walls of that great mansion. Sultan Hanum's smiling face froze in an instant. Her eyes burned with a sudden, searing rage. She stormed into the room. She looked with pure hatred at Zehra, who lay there exhausted, drenched in sweat, having just escaped the clutches of death. She glared at the tiny infant in her arms with eyes full of loathing and disgust. Was all this expense for this slip of a girl? You will be the end of my son's lineage. You incompetent wretch, you parasite. You couldn't even manage to bear a son, she screamed, shattering the heart of the new mother then and there. She slammed the door with a deafening crash. She did not ask the child's name. She did not even look at her face. Zehra clung tightly to her daughter Elif as she dissolved into sobs. She wept those bitter tears in silence, deep within her soul. As for her husband, Mustafa, that hulking man could not bring himself to her side, paralyzed by the fear of his mother. Cowed by his mother's arrogance, he could not even offer his wife a single word of comfort or solace. Instead, he remained huddled at his mother's feet. 3 long, agonizing years passed. The burden on Zehra's shoulders had increased tenfold. She was raising her daughter Elif while simultaneously toiling away at the mansion's chores. She handled the endless piles of laundry and dishes all by herself. Then Zehra became pregnant once more. This time, there was no joy in Sultan Hanum's eyes. There was only a dark, looming threat. "Listen to me, Zehra," she would say at every opportunity, wagging her finger to strike fear into her heart.
"If the child in your womb is a girl as well, if you bear me yet another unwanted burden, I will not let you stay in this house for a single second. I will cast you and your daughters back to the gutters of that orphaned village you came from. You will either bear a prince, or you will be banished from the gates of this mansion forever." Poor Zeta spent those 9 months trembling in fear, secretly performing her prayers on the ice-cold stone floors in the dead of night, pleading through her tears, "Dear God, please do not disgrace me. Do not shame my parents. Do not let my home crumble upon me." Sleep eluded her as nightmares haunted her nights. Yet such is divine providence, for who can stand in the way of the Almighty's decree? What mortal can rebel against what God has ordained? The second child was also a girl, Aisha. From that day forth, the great stone mansion turned into a living hell for Zeta, a labor camp, a chamber of torment. Sultan Kadın no longer saw Zeta as a daughter-in-law, but as a parasite, a sinner, a catastrophe that had withered their lineage. "A field that yields no prince is of no use to me. Parasites who eat for nothing," she would cry, piling all the heavy labor, the task of washing laundry in the courtyard with freezing water amidst the biting winter frost, onto Zeta's frail and weary shoulders. Zeta was forced to hoe and harvest the vast wheat fields, all by herself. She would strap her 2 young daughters to her back and under the scorching sun toil like a serf in those fields until her hands bled, drenched in sweat. Meanwhile, Isea would adorn her son Yeet with new gold coins and hurl insults whenever she saw Zeta's daughters in the courtyard. "Out of the way, you beggars, you burdens. Do not block the path of my prince, my brave one. Do not let your filth rub off on him," she would scream. Time flowed with a soul-crushing weight. And then, through her husband's weak will, Zeta became pregnant for the 3rd time.
She had lost all hope, seeking refuge only in God. Heavily pregnant, with only a few weeks left until birth and struggling even to breathe, a large group of wealthy socialite guests, relatives of Sultan Kadın, arrived at the mansion from far-off Istanbul. To show off to her arrogant guests and to have them say, "Nothing is missing in my mansion. I am a noblewoman," Sultan Kadın subjected Zehra to an unimaginable, heartless ordeal. "Listen to me, you parasite Zehra," Sultan Kadın roared in the middle of the courtyard. "Tonight, that great table in the hall will be filled with 3 types of meat dishes, trays of baklava, savory pastries, and vegetables in olive oil. If you fail my noble guests in even one detail, if a single dish is missing or lacks salt, I swear to God, I will throw you out on the street tonight, even in your condition. Now get to the stove." Zehra, with her exhausted body, heavy from pregnancy, went to the stove at 6 in the morning, in the dark. Alone, she kneaded dough, rolled out thin layers, and chopped kilograms of meat. She toiled for hours without rest by that scorching tandoor, that blazing fire. Her feet were swollen, she was doubled over with cramps in her back, unable to catch her breath. Her face had turned crimson from the heat, her eyes were burning. But she buried her pain and gritted her teeth, thinking, "As long as my mother-in-law is pleased, as long as she doesn't humiliate me in front of the guests." She buried her pain and gritted her teeth, saying, "So she doesn't speak ill of my daughters." The black soot of the hearth clung to her face, her hair matted with sweat and flour. Not a single drop of water had passed her lips all day. When the evening call to prayer echoed, that massive carved antique table was adorned like a feast fit for a sultan. Great copper trays were laid out, laden with lamb roasted to a deep golden brown, almond-studded rice pilafs, an array of sweets, and traditional sherbets. The guests, the matriarch Sultan Kadın, her sons Mustafa and Kemal, her sister-in-law Asiye, and the spoiled grandson Yeet, all took their seats of honor at the head of the table. Laughter filled the air as everyone fell upon the feast, the guests showering Sultan Hanem with endless praise. Sultan Kadın basked in the attention, smiling with a cold, haughty pride. Meanwhile, Zehra remained in the kitchen, scouring massive pots, clearing dishes, and continuing her tireless service. Once her labor was complete, she entered the hall on trembling legs, her stomach churning with the agonizing pangs of hunger. Not a single morsel had passed her lips all day. Within her, her unborn child kicked and writhed, as if crying out from starvation. She was so utterly spent that her vision blurred and her head began to swim. Silently, striving not to disturb a soul, she eased herself into an empty chair at the very foot of the long table. She picked up one of the old, battered zinc plates she used in the kitchen. She reached out a trembling, calloused hand to take but a single spoonful of the almond-studded pilaf from the center of the table. The aroma of the food seared her empty stomach. Just as she was about to bring the spoon to her plate, Sultan Kadın's eyes, sharp as a hawk's and as merciless as a demon's, fell upon her. Suddenly, she rose from her ornate carved chair in a fit of rage. The legs of the chair screeched across the marble floor as it slid backward. Sultan Kadın stood as cold as a marble statue and as ruthless as a serpent. Under the bewildered gaze of the guests, she marched the length of the long table, straight toward Zehra. Seeing her mother-in-law bearing down upon her, Zehra dropped the spoon in her hand, paralyzed by fear, her eyes widened in terror. Without a flicker of remorse, Sultan Kadın snatched the plate of meat from the pregnant woman's grasp with a sudden fury. As the plate was swept away from Zehra, the hot steam of the meal struck her eyes. "What right do you have to the bounty of this house?" Sultan Kadın bellowed. Her voice echoed through the silent mansion, reverberating against the high ceilings. "What have you given to this house? What have you contributed to this lineage that you should feast upon this noble meat? Nothing but another mouth to feed, a heavy burden of expense. You have withered my lineage. You failed to grant me a grandson as strong as a lion. You have done nothing but bear useless daughters, and surely the one in your womb is a girl as well. To one who cannot provide a prince to carry on my name, the meat of this house is forbidden. It is poison. This meat belongs to my noble daughter-in-law Asiya and my lion-hearted grandson Yiğit." Sultan Kadın carried away the steaming plate she had seized from the tearful, hungry woman. With a heavy thud, she placed it before Asiya, who sat grinning at the other end of the table. "Eat, my daughter. May it bring you health and joy. Let it nourish my prince. Let it give him strength." The table turned cold as ice, shrouded in a hellish silence. The guests from Istanbul lowered their heads in shame. Not a single soul could raise a voice against this immense cruelty. They remained frozen in place. Zehra's eyes searched for her husband in desperation. Mustafa. That man of immense stature, with his thick, imposing mustache, gazed upon his wife, hungry, pregnant, and exhausted. He watched as the plate was snatched away from her, yet he could not bring himself to say to his mother, "Mother, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? She is my wife. She is my honor. She carries my child." Mustafa could not say, remaining silent. "She spent the entire day cooking this meal. How could you take her rightful bread from her?" He simply could not utter the words. He bowed his head toward his ornate, luxurious plate, leaving his wife utterly alone against his mother's towering pride. At that table, before those wolves, Mustafa allowed his wife to be crushed and torn apart. In that moment, a large, thorny lump lodged in Zehra's throat. She could not swallow. At that table, amidst such arrogance, it was not her stomach, but her heart and her dignity that were shattered. Silently, she rose from her chair. 2 warm, sorrowful tears trickled from her eyes. Those tears fell upon her hands, burned in the kitchen and hardened by calluses. She cursed no one. She did not scream. She did not rebel. She only whispered a single sentence through her lips. She whispered the words that would shake the heavens and echo in the divine court. "My God, to those who withhold the rightful bread from me and the innocent child in my womb, close the gates of your great mercy forever. Do not let me be crushed by these stone-hearted servants. Do not let them break me, my Lord." Only a few weeks after that ominous night, everything changed. Zehra's world turned completely dark. Her 3rd child was born. It was another girl. Zehra now had 3 daughters, and to Sultan Kadın, she was nothing more than refuse. Sultan Kadın finally set her cruel and dark plan into motion without hesitation. She drew her son Mustafa into the main chamber of the great mansion and ruthlessly poured out her poison.
"This cursed woman will wither our entire lineage, Mustafa. What do 3 daughters signify? Who will carry on your name? To whom will these vast acres of land, this gold, be left? Shall we hand this wealth over to strangers, to the sons-in-law who marry those girls? You will divorce that woman tomorrow morning. Let her take those 3 stray daughters and go to whatever hell she finds. I have already found you a new bride from the town's wealthiest, young, healthy, one who will bear you sons like lions. I have arranged everything. If you do not do as I say, if you do not cast that woman out, I shall withhold my blessing, disinherit you from this vast fortune without a single penny, and turn you out." Mustafa, that money-worshipping, comfort-seeking coward who could never leave his mother's side, erased his own flesh and blood, those 3 innocent angelic daughters, and his wife Zehra, who had endured his hardships for years, washing the stones of that mansion with her tears. "Fine, mother," he said, bowing his head. "As you wish, let it be as you command." The following morning, in the ruthless winter frost that pierced to the bone and froze the breath in one's chest, Sultan Kadın led Zehra and her 3 young daughters into the courtyard of the great mansion. They lacked even proper winter coats or sturdy shoes. She heartlessly thrust a toned cloth bundle stuffed with a few old rags into Zehra's hand. "Your time here, the bread you eat, has come to an end, you stray woman," Sultan Kadın said, with a diabolical, arrogant smile of victory. "I know you have nowhere to go, but believe me, I do not care in the least. Take these stray girls of yours and get out, back to the gutter of the village you came from."
If you ever set foot again through the gates of this great mansion, the land of my ancestors, I swear I will have the guard dogs tear you to pieces. Zehra, in that biting winter chill, with her 3 little girls trembling and clinging to her legs, crying, "Mother, we are cold," was cast out before the iron gates of that vast estate like a piece of refuse. Her husband, Mustafa, did not even dare to step into the courtyard. He watched from behind the glass, cowardly hiding behind the curtain to avoid meeting her eyes. As Zehra began to walk down that snowy, muddy road, in her worn-out shoes, her infant in her arms and her daughters by her side, she turned to look at that massive stone mansion one last time. Her tears were freezing on her cheeks in the biting cold. "My lord," she said in a heart-wrenching voice, "they have cruelly cut off the sustenance and warmth of these innocent children at this great gate. Open the gates of your heavenly mercy to them, and do not leave us beholden to the ignoble." Zehra, with her 3 daughters, took refuge in an old, dilapidated, abandoned coal shed in the most remote and desolate corner of the town, a place with cracked walls, broken windows, and not even a stove. By day, she went to clean the houses of the town's wealthy, scrubbing the stairs of others with her calloused hands. Until midnight, by the dim light of a kerosene lamp, she mended neighbors' clothes and did needlework. She never allowed a single morsel of ill-gotten bread to pass her daughters' lips. She bowed to no one, nor did she ever subject them to the humiliation of begging. She raised them and put them through school with nothing but pure love, the honest sweat of her brow, and the immense compassion of a mother, scraping by with her bare hands. For years, they received not a single penny of support, not a glass of water, nor even a morsel of stale bread from either Sultan Kadın or their heartless father, Mustafa.
That grand mansion, that immense wealth, had utterly abandoned them to death, hunger, and the freezing cold. But how did life continue within that majestic manor, those towers of pride, amidst such opulence? Did the fortune they so blindly trusted bring them any solace? Mustafa married the new bride his mother had found, with grand celebrations and festivities. But the unerring, monumental gears of divine justice had begun to turn, slowly, yet with crushing force. Far from bearing the lion-like son they so desperately craved, the new bride remained childless for years. Moreover, this woman was exceedingly extravagant, a worshipper of money, who held not a shred of respect for Sultan Kadın. She was headstrong and foul-mouthed. She squandered all of Mustafa's money and the harvest from the fields in luxury boutiques and jewelry shops. She tormented Sultan Kadın daily, flouting her authority at every turn. But the true catastrophe, the predatory storm, would come from the very grandson they boasted of, the one they called my prince, my pasha, the pillar of my lineage. It would come from Yiğit, Asiye's son, the male grandchild they had fed with the meat dish snatched away from the pregnant Zehra. Divine justice had transformed the grandson who ate that meal into a literal ball of fire. Yiğit grew up amidst that vast fortune, boundless indulgence, and the arrogance of being told, "You are the master, you are the Lord." He neither pursued an education nor became a man of character. Gambling, nightlife, alcohol, loan sharks, illicit dealings, every vice imaginable was concentrated in this grandson they called their prince. By the time he reached his 20s, he lost half of that grand mansion and the ancestral lands at the gambling tables in a single night. He squandered it all on illegal betting without so much as a blink. Deceiving his uncle Mustafa and his father Kemal with forged signatures, he transferred the entire inheritance to himself. He seized the gold in the bank for his own. He dumped all those loan shark debts onto the family, and in the dead of night, Yeet, the heir they had placed all their trust in, fled the country with the entire fortune, vanishing without a trace. That massive wealth, those endless fields, the stables teeming with livestock, that century-old empire, where food was once snatched from the tables of brides, fell into the hands of ruthless loan sharks and bailiffs within just a few years. Banks seized the mansion and its antique furnishings piece by piece. The day Mustafa's new wife saw the well run dry and the gold vanish, she laughed and declared, "I cannot endure this wretched life among these paupers." She filed for divorce immediately, leaving Mustafa utterly destitute in the middle of a foreclosed home. Unable to bear the weight of such betrayal, the crushing bankruptcy, and the curse of the daughters he had cast out onto the streets, Mustafa suffered a fatal collapse brought on by grief and stress. He died on the spot at a young age, before he could even reach the hospital. Sultan Kadın, that ruthless woman whose pride could move mountains and who obsessed over her noble lineage, when she was shaken by the news of her son Mustafa's death, followed by the sale of the mansion and the total collapse of their world, a massive clot struck her brain. A profound paralysis, a severe stroke took hold of her body. From the waist down, she became completely immobile, like a dead weight. Her speech failed. That tongue, which once stung like a serpent and barked orders, could now only produce unintelligible rattles and strange noises. After all assets were seized and the mansion was sold, Sultan Kadın, now confined to a wheelchair, fell into the hands of Asiye, the daughter-in-law she once worshipped for bearing a lion of a son. She was reduced to living in Asiye's tiny, damp, rented apartment.
This was the catharsis, the great day of reckoning, the earthly reflection of divine judgment. Asiye, the arrogant daughter-in-law who had been pampered for years, living in idle luxury, began to spew her ingratitude when she was left penniless and forced to care for her paralyzed mother-in-law. She confined Sultan Kadın to the darkest, smallest, windowless room in the house, a space no better than a coal cellar. She deliberately left her uncleaned for days, tossed food before her as if to a stray dog, and hurled insults daily as if spitting in her face. One evening, as Sultan Kadın lay in that freezing bed, soiled, her stomach gnawing with hunger and her lips parched with thirst, emitting bitter wheezes, Asiye stormed into the room. In her hand was nothing but a piece of dry, stale bread and half a glass of tap water. Weeping, Sultan Kadın gestured toward the water with her trembling, paralyzed hands. Asiye sprayed the water directly into her mother-in-law's face, onto that aged countenance with hatred and loathing. "Look at me, you senile old woman," Asiye screamed, her hideous voice echoing through the room. "That precious grandson of yours, your little prince, stole everything we owned and fled. He dragged us into this misery. It is solely because of your indulgence, your arrogance, that I have ended up in this wretched rental. I am penniless now. Do you expect me to clean up after your filth as well? You reek like a carcass. You make my stomach turn. I am repulsed by you. Even if you claw yourself to pieces with those nails, there is no meat, no hot meal for you in this house. Take this dry bread and choke on it. Just die so I can be free of you," she spat, throwing the stale bread. She hurled it mercilessly at the chest of that paralyzed, helpless woman and locked the door behind her.
Sultan Kadın lay there, drowning in tears within that pitch-black bed amidst the stench of her own decay. In that moment, as that piece of dry bread fell upon her chest, her mind drifted back to those years ago in that grand, magnificent mansion. She remembered innocent Zehra at the banquet table, pregnant and starving, whose warm, meaty dish she had snatched away simply because she was carrying a girl. The words she uttered then, "You have no right to eat in this house, meat is forbidden to you," now struck her mind like a bolt of lightning, like a crushing blow. Divine justice, the silent cry of the oppressed Zehra and that starved infant, had found her years later with that very same hunger, that same desolation, binding her to her bed. The daughter-in-law and the grandson she had trusted so blindly had left her shattered and broken. Sultan Kadın wanted to scream through her paralyzed mouth, to repent, to cry out, "Forgive me, O Lord," with a voice that would tear through the heavens, but no sound emerged. It remained choked in her throat. She was living through hell, alive, in that dark, foul-smelling room. A few months later, Asiye could no longer bear the burden, the torment. Declaring, "I cannot care for this stench-ridden, paralyzed woman.
My life is ruined. She heartlessly discarded her paralyzed mother-in-law like a piece of trash, leaving her in an old wheelchair at the gates of the state nursing home on the outskirts of town in the dead of a freezing winter, fleeing without once looking back. Sultan Kadın was wasting away day by day in the cold, antiseptic-smelling corridors of that care home, amidst ruthless loneliness and misery. She had no one left, neither that family name, nor those vast fields, nor the grandson she had pinned her hopes on remained. No one came to visit. Even on holidays, no one looked her way, and no one offered a single bowl of soup. She was reduced to skin and bones, her hair falling out.
Her pride, her nobility, and her once stately posture had completely decayed, vanishing long before she would return to the earth. One morning, in the silent corridors of the nursing home, a young, brilliant female doctor, newly appointed that month, entered the room. Her face was radiant, compassionate, and she was highly accomplished. Right beside the doctor was the head nurse assisting her. She was a nurse who fed the elderly patients with tenderness, caring for them with maternal affection. The young doctor approached Sultan Kadın's iron bed with a file in her hand. She placed her hand on the forehead and the wrinkled cheeks of that aged, withered, trembling woman. "How are you, Auntie? I hope you are better today. Has your pain subsided?" she asked in her angelic, warm voice. When Sultan Kadın looked at the doctor with her aged eyes, opened with great effort, her breath suddenly caught. A lump formed in her throat. Her heart began to pound as if it would leap out, as if it would pierce through her chest. This noble, merciful, and successful doctor standing before her was the second daughter of Zehra, whom she had cast out into the freezing cold from the gates of that grand mansion years ago, saying she could not give me a prince, she only birthed the stray. She was none other than Aisha, the second daughter of that Zehra she had left fatherless. And the compassionate head nurse beside her was Elif, the eldest daughter, whose face she had not even looked at upon her birth, scoffing, "Is this what was born?" Zehra, that poor woman whose food was taken away, who was starved while pregnant and thrown out like trash in the snowy weather, she had raised those 3 orphaned girls in a makeshift coal cellar, scrubbing the stairs of others. Like digging a well with a needle, she had educated them through sheer grit and toil, ensuring they depended on no one. She had made one a prominent doctor, one a head nurse, and her youngest daughter a respected teacher. Divine Providence had opened such doors for that patient, unyielding mother and her daughters that they had now become the most esteemed and respected figures of that town. They had become the most educated, most compassionate, and most exemplary individuals in that vast country. Sultan Kadın lay helpless in that wheelchair, upon that iron bed. She was overcome with shame as she beheld her granddaughters, the very ones she had once shunned as outcasts and looked upon with loathing, now standing before her in their white coats. In her profound humiliation and the crushing weight of that divine retribution, she wished for the earth to swallow her whole. Covering her wrinkled face with her paralyzed, trembling hands, she dissolved into sobs and silent wails. The immense cruelty and malice she had inflicted flickered before her eyes like a cinematic reel. "I cast them out into the snow, yet my golden grandson stole my wealth and discarded me like refuse," she lamented inwardly. "And these girls, whom I called outcasts, are now the ones treating me. They are the ones tending to my most basic needs." She was consumed by a torment akin to the fires of hell. At that very moment, the door to the room opened softly. Zehra entered, dressed in attire that was pristine and simple, yet profoundly noble and elegant. She walked with the maturity of the passing years and a divine radiance born of her immense patience. She had come to visit her daughters at the hospital, bringing them warm, home-cooked meals prepared with her own hands. Zehra saw Sultan Kadın, paralyzed and wretched, weeping uncontrollably in her bed. As she looked upon the woman who was nothing but skin and bone, their eyes met after many years. Sultan Kadın's eyes, once filled with pride, now shattered, extinguished, and pleading, met Zehra's pure gaze. The old woman buried her head into the pillow in deep shame and brokenness. She did not have an ounce of courage left to look her in the face. Zehra slowly approached that iron bed. There was not a shred of malice within her, not a spark of vengeance, nor a trace of that insidious devilry that says, "Serves you right, God has cursed you, may you suffer worse." Amidst that poverty, while scrubbing those stairs and educating her daughters, her heart had been cleansed by a sublime patience, fully surrendered to divine justice. Zehra placed the food container, filled with warm home-cooked meat and rice, onto the nightstand. Without a hint of revulsion, she took the hands of the paralyzed woman with immense compassion, the same woman who had once tormented her and cast her out into the winter cold. "Do not cry," Zehra said, her voice soft, merciful, and devoid of any resentment. "Do not cry, Sultan Hanem. You are the grandmother of my children, the mother of my husband. That reckoning, that settling of rights, the account for the meals you snatched away from me, has long been settled on the unerring scales of the Almighty. That supreme power has both delivered your punishment and granted me the finest reward for my patience. Because we did not reach for the forbidden or succumb to pride in that coal cellar, God did not leave us in distress. Now, in your state of helplessness, to leave you hungry, to turn our backs on you, or to seek revenge would not befit our faith or the heart we carry." Zehra served the hot steaming meat dish onto a plate. She took the spoon in her hand. Years ago, at the banquet table in that grand mansion, her stone-hearted mother-in-law had ruthlessly pulled the plate of meat away from her while she was pregnant, saying, "This meat is forbidden to you." Now, to that same mouth, she fed that warm meal, that healing, saying, "May it bring you health and be truly blessed," with her own calloused hands and her immense mercy. As Sultan Hanem swallowed that food, she was swallowing the largest morsel of her life, the bitterest, heaviest morsel of divine justice.
As he witnessed how the very paradise he had discarded through his own pride and ignorance, the angels he had cast out onto the streets, now showed him mercy, he sipped that soup while burning in the searing flames of remorse within that bed, sobbing and repenting from the depths of his soul. He spent the remainder of his life confined to a bed of paralysis, dependent on the immense compassion of his daughters and daughter-in-law, whom he had once loathed and dismissed as burdens, living every second in the regret of the tyranny he had inflicted. And so, dear listeners, the pride that blinds a man, that senseless obsession with male heirs, and that hollow ignorance bury one in such darkness and strip away all conscience that one ruthlessly casts out innocent angelic daughters and a long-suffering mother of their own blood and lineage. Yet the scales of divine justice are so precise and its blow so deafening that the grand palaces you built and the grandsons you relied upon as the pillars of your lineage can bring that entire reign crashing down upon you in a single second, reducing your life to ruin. And then, when you find yourself in need of a single bowl of soup or a drop of affection, you are forced to beg at the door of the oppressed, those you once persecuted, whose bread you took, and whom you cast into the streets, pleading for their sublime mercy. May God protect us all from becoming those stone-hearted individuals who succumb to pride and discriminate between children based on their gender. Remember that a daughter is compassion. She is the blessing of the hearth and the true key to paradise. As we reach the end of this heartbreaking and cautionary tale, we have a small request for you, our dear friends. If we have managed to impart a lesson or touched your hearts, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with your loved ones by giving it a like.
Remember that, through the precious support you provide via the join button and the super thanks you send, we are able to reach more people with these seeds of kindness and justice, these exemplary parables. In the comment section below, we ask, if you were in Zeta's place, would you forgive that cruel mother-in-law who years later lost her vast fortune and became bedridden with paralysis? The same woman who once cast you out into the bitter cold, and would you feed her with your own hands? We eagerly await your answers and your beautiful, profound insights. Until we meet again in new cautionary tales defined by beauty, mercy, and righteousness, cherish your children, and may you all be entrusted to the care of Almighty Allah.
Evet, saygıdeğer misafirler, videomuz bitmiştir. Videomuzu beğendiyseniz beğen tuşuna basmayı, abone olmayı, bildirimleri açmayı unutmayınız. Bu tarz videoları seviyorsanız kanalımızdaki diğer videolara da göz atabilirsiniz. Bize destek olmak için yorum yapmayı, videoyu paylaşmayı unutmayınız. Maddi destek için katılabilir, süper teşekkür gönderebilirsiniz. Bir dahaki videoda görüşmek üzere. Kendinize iyi bakın.